On a cold morning in May 1999, a group of police officers stepped into an abandoned bank building in rural South Australia, unaware that what they were about to uncover would become one of the most chilling and infamous crime scenes in the country's history. The building, in the tiny town of Snowtown, stood quiet and unremarkable from the outside, a forgotten relic of better days. What lay inside, however, was anything but ordinary. Behind layers of dust and silence, in a vault no one had opened in years, the smell hit them first, a sickening, overwhelming stench that clawed at their senses and made some gasp. Covered in plastic sheets and tightly sealed lids were 6 large barrels, and inside those barrels were human bodies, dismembered, some partially dissolved, others grotesquely preserved in a way that defied explanation. 8 people had been murdered and placed within those barrels, which were filled with hydrochloric acid and other corrosive substances. The discovery sent shockwaves not only through the law enforcement community, but across Australia and around the world. How could such horror be hidden in plain sight? How could 8 lives, 8 unique individuals, end up in barrels sealed with acid, forgotten and ignored until that grisly morning in Snowtown? The answers lay in a twisted combination of brutality, manipulation, and human depravity that spanned almost an entire decade. The Snowtown murders were not the result of a single night of violence or a crime of passion. They were the product of a slow, methodical descent into brutality by a group of men who believed, or at least convinced themselves, that their actions were justified. The mastermind was a man named John Bunting, a charismatic yet deeply disturbed figure whose influence over his accomplices would lead to the deaths of at least 11 people between 1992 and 1999. Bunting was born on 4 September 1966, and from a young age, his life was marked by violence and trauma. As a child, he suffered physical and sexual abuse, experiences that would leave lasting psychological scars. Adults who knew him later would describe him as intelligent and persuasive, but also someone who harbored intense hatreds and obsessions. It was these obsessions, including a vitriolic loathing for those he labeled as pedophiles, homosexuals, drug users, people with intellectual disabilities, and anyone he considered weak or undesirable, that set the stage for what became one of the worst serial killing sprees in Australian history. Bunting didn't kill alone. 2 men, Robert Joe Wagner and James Spiridon Vlasakis, became his closest accomplices. Wagner, befriended by Bunting in the early 1990s, shared a connection with him through their mutual distrust and hostility toward others. Vlasakis, younger than the others and drawn in through Bunting's influence, would become both participant and later a key witness in the case against his co-conspirators. A 4th man, Mark Ray Hayden, would be convicted not of murder, but of assisting in concealing the bodies. The killings began in August 1992, when the body of Clinton Douglas Trezise was found buried at Lower Light, near Adelaide. Trezise had been invited into Bunting's home for what appeared to be a casual social visit, a visit from which he would never return alive. He was bludgeoned to death with a shovel in the living room, and though this early murder was brutal, it would scarcely foreshadow the horrors that were to follow. For years, victims disappeared, deaths occurred, and suspicion occasionally flickered in isolated incidents. But no one could connect the dots. Some deaths were initially treated as unrelated. One man's passing was recorded as a suspected suicide, while another's was lost in the chaos of missing persons reports that never gained traction. The killers operated in a shadow world, blurring the lines between vigilantism, hatred, and cold-blooded murder. What made Bunting's approach especially insidious was his method of choosing victims. He kept what became known as a rock spider wall in his home, a corkboard covered with paper notes, post-it tags, strings of wool connecting names and allegations. Each name represented someone Bunting believed had crossed a boundary of morality or decency. Randomly or deliberately, he would pick a name and target that individual, often convincing himself that he was delivering justice to a corrupt world. Some victims were acquaintances, neighbors, or connected through social circles. Others were merely vulnerable people on the fringes of society, drug users, isolated older men, or individuals with learning difficulties who were easy targets for manipulation and violence. The methods of murder were varied and cruel. Some victims were tortured, forced to endure physical torment before their deaths. Others were strangled or bludgeoned. The killers sometimes forced victims to provide recordings of their voices so that the perpetrators could play these recordings to friends or family and convince them that the victim was still alive. They used fear and deceit as weapons, prolonging the agony of those left behind who struggled to understand what had happened. One of the most horrifying aspects of the case wasn't just the killings themselves. It was what happened afterward, what the perpetrators did to erase the evidence, to twist the horror into something almost unthinkable. Once a victim was dead, their body didn't simply disappear. Instead, it was often dismembered. Limbs and torsos were carefully separated and placed into barrels, like objects to be hidden rather than human lives taken. These barrels weren't left in one place. At first, they were scattered, stored in garages, sheds, even buried in backyards. Each location was chosen to avoid detection, to keep the macabre secret just out of reach of authorities. Eventually, the barrels were moved to a single, sinister location, the old bank vault at Snowtown. There, the bodies of 8 victims would sit, their remains submerged in corrosive acid. The acid wasn't just a method of disposal, it was an attempt to obliterate the evidence, to erase the proof of what had been done. Over time, the corrosive liquid ate away at the flesh and bone, leaving behind a chilling reminder of the perpetrator's calculated cruelty. The method itself revealed a disturbing level of planning. This wasn't a crime committed in a single moment of rage. Every step, from dismemberment to transport, from storage to chemical dissolution, was meticulously executed, showing an almost clinical detachment from human life. Yet the horror didn't stop at the physical. The financial exploitation of the victims added another layer of depravity. The killers didn't just end lives, they exploited them. They obtained social security numbers, personal information, and bank details from their victims. Long after the victims were gone, the perpetrators continued to collect welfare payments in their names. Investigators later discovered that the group had amassed tens of thousands of dollars this way. The money wasn't just a side benefit, it was a calculated move to benefit from the crime while covering their tracks. Though financial gain was likely not the primary motive, it highlighted the manipulative and predatory nature of the perpetrators. They weren't only killers, they were strategists, thinking several steps ahead to exploit every opportunity. The combination of physical horror and calculated financial abuse painted a picture of criminal minds operating without conscience. Each barrel, each false payment, each hidden vault became a symbol of their control over life and death. Community members and investigators alike were left grappling with the enormity of the crime. It was one thing to process the killings themselves, but the methodical, almost business-like way in which the crimes were hidden and how they were profited from added a new level of disgust. The Snowtown Vault became an infamous symbol. 8 lives, reduced to fragments and chemicals, hidden in secrecy, while the perpetrators continued to manipulate the system. Even now, when the case is revisited, the image of those barrels remains haunting. It's a reminder that evil can be both grotesque and methodical, that cruelty doesn't always roar. It sometimes plans, calculates, and profits. One of the most haunting moments of the entire investigation came with the discovery of the barrels. Police had been following a trail, tips, surveillance, reports of suspicious activity, and the disappearances of several people whose absence had long puzzled the community. Each lead was painstakingly examined, each connection carefully traced. It was a 4-wheel drive vehicle, seemingly ordinary, that ultimately drew their attention. Inside were barrels, heavy and ominous, linked to the suspects under investigation. The vehicle led them to an abandoned bank, a crumbling relic of a place that had once symbolized safety and trust, now twisted into a chamber of horror. When officers arrived at the vault, the first thing they noticed was the smell, a pungent, choking blend of decomposition and chemicals that made their stomachs turn. Breathing gear was immediately required, but even with masks, the stench was overpowering, searing itself into memory. The vault door creaked open, revealing row after row of plastic barrels. Each was identical, each sealed tightly, a grim testament to the lengths taken to conceal what lay inside. There was a silence, heavy and uneasy, as officers prepared to confront what they already suspected. The first barrel was pried open. Inside, the proof of unspeakable acts was undeniable. A human foot, partially decomposed, rested among other remains. Fragments of lives that had been extinguished and hidden, carefully stored for years in this decaying chamber. The scene was surreal, almost cinematic in its horror, yet devastatingly real. Every officer knew they were witnessing the tangible evidence of crimes that had long haunted investigators' minds, but had been so difficult to prove. The sheer scale was staggering. More barrels lined the walls, each potentially holding additional victims, each a cruel reminder of the calculated nature of the perpetrators. These weren't crimes of impulse. Every detail, the dismemberment, the barrels, the transport to the vault, spoke to careful, methodical planning. Officers moved cautiously, documenting, photographing, and preserving the scene. Every barrel opened deepened the sense of disbelief. This was more than a crime. It was a chilling orchestration of evil, an attempt to erase lives while storing the horror like merchandise. The vault itself, a space meant to protect valuables, had become a tomb. The contrast between its intended purpose and its horrifying new role made the crime feel even more grotesque. For the community, the revelation would be unimaginable. The notion that multiple lives could be taken, hidden, and chemically dissolved in a single location was almost beyond comprehension. The vault became a symbol not just of death, but of betrayal, manipulation, and cruelty carried out with cold precision. Even now, when the details are recounted, the mental image of those barrels lingers. The heavy lids, the smell, the first glimpse of human remains. It is a haunting reminder of the dark extremes humans are capable of when deception, malice, and calculation collide. The Snowtown Vault would forever be etched in criminal history as a place where horror was meticulously preserved. Collectively, the deaths linked to the Snowtown killers reached 12 people, though not all were found in the barrels. 2 more bodies were later discovered buried in the backyard of Bunting's home in Adelaide's northern suburbs, deepening the mystery of how many victims there truly were and the lengths the perpetrators went to cover their tracks. The horror that unfolded in Snowtown forced authorities to reevaluate several cold cases and previously unexplained disappearances. Names like Thomas Eugenio Trevelyan, Barry Lane, Michael Gardner, and Troy Eude emerged as part of the labyrinth of killings. Some were tortured for information, others for financial details. In one particularly gruesome incident, a victim's flesh was reportedly fried and eaten by Bunting and Wagner, a detail that shocked even hardened investigators when it came to light during the trial. As the investigation progressed, police focused intensely on the men already under suspicion. Days of surveillance, interviews, and piecing together the movement of people and vehicles eventually led to the arrests of Bunting, Wagner, and Hayden on 21 May 1999. Vlasakis was arrested days later on 26 May. The scale of the crimes unfolded slowly as detectives connected the dots from the barrels in Snowtown to bodies buried on properties. The trial that followed was one of the longest and most publicized in Australian legal history. Over 11 months, the court heard from 227 witnesses, and the proceedings cost millions of dollars. For weeks, jurors were presented with evidence that ranged from forensic analysis to chilling testimonies of acts of violence, torture, and psychological control. The sheer brutality of the crimes shocked jurors, legal professionals, and the public alike. In the end, the verdicts reflected the enormity of the crimes. John Bunting, the ringleader and architect of the killings, was convicted of 11 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Robert Wagner was found guilty of 10 murders and likewise received life sentences without the possibility of release. James Vlasakis, who had pleaded guilty to 4 of the murders and provided key testimony against his co-accused, received a life sentence with a minimum non-parole period of 26 years. Mark Ray Hayden, who assisted in concealing bodies rather than committing the murders themselves, was given a lengthy prison sentence, 25 years with an 18-year non-parole period, for his role in hiding evidence. Even after convictions, the case continued to reverberate through the community and the broader Australian conscience. In some cases, legal and ethical debates erupted when accomplices like Hayden and Vlasakis later sought parole or release after serving significant portions of their sentences. Victims' families and advocates argued that the gravity of the crime should preclude release, while authorities engaged in complex legal arguments about rehabilitation, punishment, and justice. The psychological impact on investigators was unlike anything they had experienced before. Officers who first entered the Snowtown bank vault described the scene as seared into their memories. The barrels, row after row, heavy lids sealed tight, were more than containers. They were symbols of calculated horror. Even years later, some spoke of the smell, a pungent, acrid mixture of chemicals and decomposition that seemed to cling to clothing, hair, and skin. It invaded their senses in ways that no amount of washing could erase. Forensic teams faced a different but equally haunting challenge. Every barrel told a story of methodical cruelty. The dismembered remains, submerged in corrosive acid, spoke of careful planning. It was grotesque. Every detail was designed to hide the truth, yet each one revealed the meticulousness of the perpetrators. The weight of what they had uncovered extended beyond the vault. Each officer and investigator had to carry the knowledge that such evil had existed in their midst. For the residents of Snowtown, the murders left a scar on the community itself. The town, once quiet and unassuming, was thrust into a global spotlight for reasons it could never have imagined. The name Snowtown became synonymous with horror. Locals struggled to reconcile this identity with the lives they had led. Everyday routines, grocery shopping, walking the streets, attending school, were now underscored by the knowledge of what had taken place in their own backyards. Some residents even considered changing the town's name, desperate to dissociate from the grisly legacy that had defined it. But the shadow of the murders was long, and no change in signage or letterhead could erase the memory of what had happened. The psychological toll extended far beyond immediate proximity to the crime scene. Families, neighbors, and even children had to come to terms with the reality that profound evil could exist in their midst, hidden beneath layers of normalcy. Counselors, social workers, and psychologists were called in to help both survivors and the wider community process the trauma. Yet for many, the images and knowledge could never be fully erased. They lingered in thoughts, dreams, and conversations, a reminder that the human capacity for cruelty sometimes exists where it is least expected. The town itself became a case study in the lingering effects of violent crime. Snowtown's streets, homes, and abandoned vaults became symbols of both horror and resilience. Residents had to navigate the tension between mourning, fear, and the desire to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Even now, decades later, the story of Snowtown serves as a stark warning. It demonstrates how calculated evil can remain hidden, how ordinary places can harbor unimaginable darkness, and how the aftermath of crime can ripple through every corner of a community. The legacy is twofold: the enduring trauma of those directly involved, and the haunting reminder that evil does not always announce itself. It can lie dormant, meticulously hidden. Snowtown, once a quiet town, will forever bear the weight of that revelation. A place where horror and humanity collided in the most unsettling way imaginable. Perhaps the most tragic element of the Snowtown murders is the humanity that was lost. These were not the results of a sudden argument or a moment of uncontrolled rage. The victims did not die in a single act of impulse. Instead, their lives were extinguished by a sustained. Each person had a story, a life with hopes, dreams, and relationships. All of it was stolen, trimmed away methodically by perpetrators who saw others as less than human. The calculated nature of the acts made the crimes even more horrifying. It was a stark reminder of what can happen when hatred goes unchecked, when warped ideologies and extremism are allowed to fester without resistance. The murders serve as a chilling lesson in the darkness that can emerge from manipulation, fear, and the devaluation of human life. The victim's individuality was erased, reduced to numbers. Behind every detail was a life interrupted, a family grieving, a community traumatized, a story left unfinished. Even years later, the weight of those losses continues to reverberate. Survivors, investigators, and witnesses carry memories that cannot be erased. The psychological scars are a testament to the far-reaching consequences of violence, extending far beyond the immediate victims. The case also became a focal point for criminologists and psychologists, a grim study in human behavior. Scholars analyzed every decision, every manipulation, every step of the crime, seeking to understand how ordinary individuals could commit extraordinary acts of evil. The story of Snowtown has been retold in countless discussions, documentaries, and analyses, serving both as a warning and a tool for education. It reveals the dangers of influence, the power of fear, and the way manipulation can turn ordinary people into instruments of destruction. In 2011, the Australian film Snowtown brought the case to a global audience, dramatizing the chilling transformation from ordinary life to horrifying death. The film explored the journey from trust to betrayal, from routine domestic life to unimaginable terror, capturing the psychological manipulation and the slow descent into violence that defined the murders. Through these retellings, the world has been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. The case is not just a series of murders, it is a study in moral collapse, the fragility of societal safeguards, and the consequences of ignoring warning signs. Yet amid the horror, there is also reflection. Documentaries, films, and academic studies attempt to honor the lives that were lost, to preserve their humanity, and to extract lessons that might prevent similar tragedies. It is an acknowledgement that while evil can destroy, awareness, understanding, and vigilance can save lives in the future. Snowtown remains a symbol of both horror and warning. Its story illustrates how darkness can hide in the most ordinary of places, how trust can be weaponized, and how ordinary communities can be shaken to their core by acts of extreme cruelty. Even as time passes, the memories of those who died and the painstaking efforts of survivors and investigators to seek justice continue to resonate. The victims are no longer silent. They live on through the lessons their lives and deaths impart. The Snowtown murders, in all their brutality, continue to challenge our understanding of evil, manipulation, and the human capacity for both suffering and resilience. They are a story that refuses to fade, a cautionary tale etched into the fabric of history. The Bodies in the Barrels case remains a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty and of the relentless effort it takes to uncover the truth behind such darkness. Even decades later, Snowtown's name evokes a visceral reaction, a testament to the enduring legacy of one of Australia's worst serial killings.